January 21st, 1968. The mist is clinging to the ground like a shroud. If you lick your lips, you taste iron. If you touch the ground, your hand comes away, stained red. This is Khe Sanh, a plateau in the corner of South Vietnam, surrounded by mountains that look like the teeth of a dragon. To the generals in Washington, it is a strategic combat base, a pin on a map, a kill box designed to lure the enemy into the open. But to the 6,000 U.S. Marines trapped inside, it is not a base. It is a toilet. It is a cage. It is a grave. My name is John Miller. My friends call me Lucky, not because I win at poker, but because I am the only guy in my platoon who hasn't caught dysentery yet. I am 19 years old. 6 months ago, I was bagging groceries at a store in Columbus, Ohio. I was worrying about my high school prom and whether Sarah, the girl with the yellow ribbon in her hair, would say yes to a movie date. Now, I am sitting in a hole in the ground, hugging a wet M16 rifle. I haven't seen a movie in months. I haven't seen a girl in forever. And the only thing I am worrying about is whether that whistling sound in the sky is going to land 20 feet away or right on top of my head. Let's go back just 6 months. When I enlisted, the recruiters showed me posters of brave men in crisp uniforms. They talked about fighting communism. They talked about honor. They didn't talk about jungle rot, a fungus that eats your feet until the skin peels off like a wet sock. They didn't talk about punji stakes, bamboo spikes smeared with filth, hiding in the tall grass. And they certainly didn't talk about the smell. I arrived in Da Nang in late 1967. The first thing that hit me when the plane door opened wasn't the heat. It was the smell. A mixture of burning diesel, jet fuel, dried fish, and something else. Something sweet and sickly. Formaldehyde. The smell of preserving dead bodies. It was the smell of the return shipment. While me and the new guys, cherries, as the veterans called us, were walking down the ramp, silver aluminum caskets were being loaded onto another plane nearby. One set of boys coming in, one set of boys going out. I looked away. I focused on my boots. Just do your tour, I told myself. 365 days. Then you go back to Sarah. I was assigned to the 26th Marine Regiment. Destination, Khe Sanh. When the helicopter dropped us off, I thought I had landed on Mars. The Earth wasn't brown. It was a violent, rusty red, laterite clay. When it was dry, it turned into a fine powder that coated your lungs. When it rained, it turned into a sticky glue that could suck the boots right off your feet. The base was isolated. It sat on a plateau, surrounded on all sides by thick, triple canopy jungle. The mountains looming over us had names like Hill 881 and Hill 861. They were beautiful, majestic, green giants, but they were owned by the enemy. The North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, sat up there in the clouds. They had artillery, they had rockets, and they had patience. They looked down at us in the bowl below like kids looking at ants in a jar. The first few weeks were boring. War is 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror, my sergeant, Gunny Holloway, used to say. Holloway was a grim man. He had fought in Korea. He didn't talk about glory. He talked about digging. "Dig deeper, Miller," he would bark. "You want to sleep? You sleep when you're dead. Right now, you dig. If that hole isn't 6 feet deep, you're just digging your own shallow grave." So I dug. My hands blistered. My back ached. I built walls of sandbags, layers of timber, steel matting from old runways. I created a small, dark cave. This was my home. I shared it with two other Marines. One was Tex, a loudmouthed kid from Dallas, who claimed he could shoot a fly off a mule's ear at 100 yards. The other was Professor, a quiet black kid from Chicago, who read poetry books when the Sarge wasn't looking. Three strangers, bound together by mud and fear. The psychological war began before the shooting did. At night, the jungle came alive. You couldn't see anything past the barbed wire. It was pitch black, but you could hear them. Sometimes the NVA would use loudspeakers. They would play eerie music, or a woman's voice speaking perfect English. "GI, go home." The voice would drift through the fog. "Your government has abandoned you. Sarah is cheating on you. You will die here." I would grip my rifle until my knuckles turned white. "Shut up," I would whisper. "Just shut up." Tex would spit tobacco juice and curse. Professor would just close his eyes and hum a jazz tune to drown it out. They were testing us, probing, watching. The NVA general, Vo Nguyen Giap, was planning a masterpiece. He wanted to surround us, cut off our supply lines, and squeeze us until we suffocated. He moved 20,000 troops through the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They dragged heavy artillery pieces, Soviet-made 130 milliport guns, up the steep mountain slopes by hand, inch by inch. While I was eating my canned peaches, a mile away, an NVA soldier was aiming a cannon barrel directly at my bunker, January 20th. The day the world ended. It started with a skirmish on the hills. But the real horror began the next day. I was filling sandbags near the ammo dump when I heard it. It wasn't the usual mortar sound. This was deeper, heavier, like a freight train falling from the sky. Someone screamed, "Incoming!" I didn't think. I dove. I hit the red dirt face first, covering my head with my hands. The first shell didn't hit me. It hit the main ammunition dump, 1,500 tons of explosives. Artillery shells, C4, grenades, bullets, all of it went up in a single second. The ground didn't just shake, it rippled like water. I felt the air being sucked out of my lungs. The shock wave lifted me off the ground and threw me against the sandbag wall. For a moment, I thought I was dead. The sky turned black, then orange. Secondary explosions popped like firecrackers. Tear gas canisters stored nearby burst open. Thick, choking gas flooded the trenches. I scrambled for my gas mask. My fingers were shaking so hard I couldn't get the straps over my head. "Tex!" "Professor!" I screamed, but I couldn't hear my own voice. The explosion had ruptured my eardrums. The world was a silent movie of chaos. I saw men running with their mouths open, screaming silently. I saw a jeep flipped upside down, its wheels spinning. I saw the ammo dump burning like a volcano, spewing molten metal into the sky. I finally got my mask on. The rubber smelled of old sweat. I sucked in a breath. I crawled back to my bunker. Inside, Tex was curled up in a ball, bleeding from his nose. Concussion. Professor was frantically trying to clear the entrance, which had partially collapsed. I grabbed Tex by the flak jacket and shook him. "We're alive!" I yelled, though I couldn't hear myself. "Check your limbs. Are you hit?" Tex looked at me with wide, terrified eyes and nodded. He was okay, physically, but the look in his eyes, something had broken in there. That night, the shelling didn't stop. It was only the beginning. The ammo dump was gone. 90% of our artillery shells were destroyed. We were trapped. The NVA had cut Route 9, the only road into the base. No trucks could come in. No trucks could go out. The only way to survive was by air. But the NVA had anti-aircraft guns on every mountain peak. Every plane that tried to land had to fly through a gauntlet of steel. I sat in the dark bunker that night. The air was thick with smoke and tear gas. I pulled out my notepad. My hands were covered in red dust and dried blood, not my own. I tried to write to Sarah. I wanted to tell her about the explosion. I wanted to tell her that I was scared, but I couldn't. If I wrote the truth, it would make it real. So I lied. Dear Sarah, I wrote. Things are okay here. A bit noisy today, like a thunderstorm back home. We are safe in our bunkers. The food is okay. Don't worry about the news reports. The journalists always exaggerate. I'm keeping my head down. I love you. John. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Outside, a flare popped, bathing the battlefield in a ghostly green light. I looked at my watch, 1 day down. I didn't know how many were left, but I knew one thing. The boy who left Ohio was gone. Whatever walked out of this valley, if anything walked out, it wouldn't be John Miller. February 1968. Time in Khe Sanh didn't move in hours or minutes. It moved in cigarettes. How long until dawn? 3 cigarettes. How long until the water run? Half a pack. We had been under siege for 3 weeks. The adrenaline of the first explosion was gone. Now it was just a dull, grinding misery. The NVA tightened the noose around our necks. They dug their own trenches, inching closer every night. Sometimes we could hear them digging. A rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape in the dark. It sounded like they were digging our graves. The biggest enemy wasn't the artillery anymore. It was the fog, a thick gray soup that rolled down from the mountains every afternoon. It blinded us. It grounded our air support. When the fog was heavy, the Phantoms and Skyhawks couldn't fly. No napalm, no bombs. We were alone. And inside that fog, the snipers waited. We called the main runway Sniper Alley. To get fresh water, you had to cross it. It was a 300-yard sprint across open concrete. Every time you ran, you were betting your life against a man sitting a mile away with a scope. I remember watching a kid from Delta Company make the run. He was carrying 2 jerry cans of water. He was fast. He was zigzagging. He was almost at the bunker. Then, crack. He didn't scream. He just dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The water cans spilled onto the dust. Nobody ran out to get him. You couldn't. If you went out, you were next. We just watched the water evaporate in the heat. That was the hardest part. Not seeing him die, but watching that clean, precious water disappear into the dirt while our throats were burning with thirst. Water became more valuable than gold. We were rationed to half a canteen a day. That was for drinking, shaving, and washing. Needless to say, nobody washed. We became animals. The red dust mixed with our sweat and formed a second skin. We smelled of ammonia and rot, and the rats loved it. The rats at Khe Sanh were not like the rats in Ohio. These things were the size of cats. They were bold. They weren't afraid of us. Why should they be? They were eating better than we were. There were bodies out in the wire that we couldn't retrieve. The rats feasted at night. You would wake up in your bunker and feel a heavy weight on your chest. You'd scream and throw your boot and see a pair of red eyes staring back at you from the corner. Tex hated them. He spent hours making traps out of sea ration cans and tripwire. "I'm gonna kill 'em all, John," he would mutter, his eyes bloodshot. "Every last one of 'em." I think Tex was losing his mind. He stopped talking about Dallas. He stopped talking about girls. He just talked about the rats. But Professor was different. While Tex got angry, Professor got quiet. He was the glue that held us together. When the shelling was bad, when the ground was shaken so hard your teeth rattled, Professor would read to us. He had a battered copy of a book. The Iliad. Stories about ancient wars. Achilles, Hector. "Why you readin' that old junk?" Tex would ask. Professor would push his glasses up his nose. They were cracked, held together with white tape, and smile. "Because, Tex," he would say softy, "it reminds me that we aren't the first men to be stupid enough to die for a hill." Professor kept me human. He forced me to eat when I wasn't hungry. He checked my feet for jungle rot. He talked about his plans. He wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to teach history in a high school in Chicago. "Kids need to know, John," he told me one night. "If they know history, maybe they won't end up in a hole like this." February 12th. A C-130 transport plane tried to land to bring us supplies. It was a suicide mission. The NVA anti-aircraft guns opened up. We watched from our trench as the plane took a hit to the wing. It spiraled down, trailing black smoke, and crashed just outside the perimeter. It burned for 6 hours. We couldn't get to the crew. We just listened to the ammunition inside the plane cooking off. Pop, pop, boom. That afternoon, the mood in the bunker was heavy. We were low on ammo. We were low on water. And we had just watched our ride home burn to ash. Professor was cleaning his rifle. He was meticulous about it. The red dust jammed the M16s constantly. If you didn't clean it every few hours, it became a useless stick. "I'm going to check the perimeter wire," Professor said. He stood up. "Sit down, Prof," I said. "The fog is lifting. Snipers are active." "I lost my book," he said. "I think I left it by the sandbag wall this morning. I'll be right back." I should have stopped him. I should have grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. I've played that moment in my head 1,000 times. I watched him crawl out of the bunker. He stood up, crouched low, scanning the ground for his book. He found it. He picked it up and turned back towards me. He was smiling. He held the book up like a trophy. The sun broke through the clouds for just a second. It glinted off his taped glasses. There was no sound at first, just a pink mist. It erupted from the back of Professor's head. The sound of the shot arrived a split second later. Crack! Professor didn't fall forward. He was thrown backward, like he had been kicked in the chest by a horse. He hit the mud and didn't move. "Professor!" I screamed. I didn't think about the sniper. I didn't think about cover. I scrambled out of the hole and dragged him back in by his flak jacket. Tex was already there, ripping open the medical kit. "Pressure! Put pressure on it!" Tex yelled. I pressed my hands against his head, but there was nothing to press. The bullet, probably a .50 caliber, had taken everything. The light was already gone from his eyes. His glasses were lying in the dirt, shattered. And his book, the Iliad, was soaking up his blood. We sat there for a long time, me and Tex, covered in the blood of the only decent man in our platoon. We didn't cry. You think you will cry in war, but you don't. You just go empty. It feels like someone reached inside your chest and turned off a switch. Tex picked up the book. He wiped the blood off the cover with his sleeve. He handed it to me. "You keep it, John," he whispered. His voice sounded like broken glass. "You're the writer." That night, I took out my notepad. I looked at the letter I had started to Sarah. "Things are okay here." I tore the page out. I crumpled it up and threw it into the corner with the rats. I couldn't lie to her anymore. But I couldn't tell her the truth either. How do you tell a girl in Ohio that you just watched your best friend's brain get blown out over a poetry book? You don't. You bury it. You push it down into the dark place where you keep the fear. I picked up my rifle. I checked the chamber. I looked at Tex. He was sharpening his bayonet. The look in his eyes had changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was hate. Pure, cold hate. "They're coming, John," Tex said, staring at the bunker wall. "I can feel them. They're coming tonight." He was right. The digging had stopped. The shelling had stopped. The silence was louder than the bombs. The NVA weren't probing anymore. They were gathering. They were coming to finish what they started. I put Professor's broken glasses in my pocket. I tightened my bootlaces. I realized then that I wasn't fighting for America. I wasn't fighting for democracy. I wasn't even fighting for Sarah. I was fighting for the guy next to me. And I was fighting to kill the sons of bitches who killed Professor. Welcome to the siege. The real siege. Everything before this was just a warm-up. 2 a.m. The darkness in Vietnam is not like the darkness in Ohio. In Ohio, your eyes adjust. Starlight helps you. Here, the darkness is a solid thing. It presses against your eyeballs. It feels heavy. We were waiting. Tex was sitting on an ammo crate, running a whetstone along the blade of his bayonet. It was the only sound in the bunker. Professor's blood was still dried on the floor. We hadn't cleaned it up. We didn't have the water to spare. I was peering out into the wire. My eyes were playing tricks on me. I saw shapes moving in the elephant grass. I saw shadows dancing. "You see 'em?" Tex whispered. "No," I said, "but I can smell 'em." It was true. The wind had shifted. It carried a faint sour smell. Nuck mom sauce. Unwashed bodies. Damp canvas. The smell of the North Vietnamese army. Then a sound. Not a gunshot. Not an explosion. A click. The distinct metallic click of a tripwire snapping. A second later, a trip flare ignited out in the gray zone. It hissed and burned with a blinding white magnesium light. And there they were. Hundreds of them. They weren't crawling. They were running. They were already inside the first perimeter wire. Sappers. Men stripped down to their underwear, covered in grease to slide through the barbed wire, carrying satchel charges strapped to their chests. Human bombs. "They're in the wire!" I screamed. My voice cracked, and then hell opened its mouth. The world exploded into noise. Green tracers from the NVA and red tracers from our machine guns crossed in the air like a deadly laser show. Tex didn't hesitate. He kicked the sandbag wall and leveled his M60 machine gun. "Come on! Come get some!" he roared. The gun shook the entire bunker. I watched bodies fall in the strobe light of the flares. But they kept coming. They were stepping over their own dead. They were relentless. I grabbed my M16. I aimed at a shadow running toward our trench. I squeezed the trigger. Bang! One shot. I squeezed again. Click! Nothing. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through my veins. I looked at the ejection port. A stovepipe jam. The cheap powder in the ammo and the red dust had gummed up the action. "Jam!" I yelled. "I'm jammed!" Tex didn't hear me. He was screaming, firing long bursts into the darkness. The shadow jumped into the trench. He was small, wiry. He held an AK-47 in one hand and a grenade in the other. We locked eyes for a fraction of a second. He raised the rifle. I dropped my useless M16 and grabbed the only thing I had left, an entrenching tool, a folding shovel with a sharpened edge. I swung it like a baseball bat. I hit him in the neck just as his rifle went off. The bullet whizzed past my ear, deafening me. He went down. I didn't stop. I hit him again and again. I was crying. I think I was screaming. I don't remember. I just remember the sound of the shovel hitting bone. It was wet and dull. I fell back against the mud wall, gasping for air. My hands were slippery with blood. I looked at Tex. He was still firing. But the barrel of his machine gun was glowing cherry red. "Barrel change! I need a barrel!" Tex yelled. But we didn't have a spare barrel. We had lost it in the ammo dump explosion. "Let it burn!" I yelled back. Suddenly, a satchel charge landed right on the edge of our bunker. It looked like a canvas bag with a burning fuse. "Grenade!" Tex didn't dive for cover. He did the stupidest, bravest thing I have ever seen. He grabbed the charge and threw it back. It exploded in the air, 10 feet away. The shockwave knocked us both flat. Dirt and shrapnel rained down on us. I couldn't hear anything. My ears were bleeding. I looked over at Tex. He was trying to stand up, but his right arm, his throwing arm, was a mess, shredded. He looked at it confused. Then he looked at me and grinned, a bloody, maniacal grin. "I got him, John," he slurred. "I got the bastard." But we were overrun. They were swarming the trench line. We retreated to the secondary line. We were running through the mud, dragging Tex. I could see the command bunker radio operator screaming into the handset. "Broken arrow! Broken arrow! They are inside the perimeter. Request immediate air support on my coordinates." Broken arrow. The code that means, "We are going to die, so kill everyone down here. Drop the napalm on us." I dragged Tex into a crater. "Stay down," I told him. I wrapped a tourniquet around his arm. He was pale. He was losing too much blood. "John," he whispered, "where's Professor? Is he okay?" I froze. Tex was delirious. He had forgotten. "Yeah, Tex," I lied. "He's okay. He's right behind us." Tex closed his eyes. "Good. That's good." Then the sky ripped open. The phantoms arrived. They didn't drop bombs. They dropped canisters of napalm. It didn't explode. It splashed. A wave of liquid fire rolled over the perimeter wire, just 50 yards in front of us. It sucked the oxygen out of the air. The heat was so intense it singed my eyebrows. I heard screams. Terrible screams. Not human. The NVA attack broke. No living thing could survive that wall of fire. The sun started to rise an hour later. It rose over a landscape that looked like the surface of the moon. smoking craters, tangled wire, blackened earth. The smell was unbearable. Roast pork and sulfur. I sat in the crater, holding Tex's hand. It was cold. He had died sometime during the napalm strike. He went quietly, amidst the noise of the apocalypse. I was the only one left. Professor was gone. Tex was gone. I was 19 years old, and I was the oldest man in the world. I checked my body. I had shrapnel in my leg. My uniform was torn. I was covered in red clay and dried blood. A lieutenant walked by. He looked like a ghost. "Miller," he said. He didn't look at me. He looked at the bodies being stacked near the landing zone. "Get your gear. Helicopters are coming. We're evacuating the wounded." "I'm staying," I said. I don't know why I said it. "Get on the bird, Marine," the lieutenant said. "That's an order. You're done. You're going home." Home. The word sounded foreign. What was home? Was it Ohio? Was it the grocery store? Was it Sarah? Or was home this hole in the mud, where my friends died for nothing? I stood up. My leg screamed in pain. I picked up my jammed rifle. I picked up Professor's blood-stained book from Tex's pocket. I walked toward the landing zone. I didn't look back, because if I looked back, I knew I would never be able to leave. Part of me, the best part of me, was staying in that red clay forever. The helicopter ride out of Khe Sanh was the longest hour of my life. I sat on the canvas seat, vibrating with the roar of the rotor blades. I looked down. Through the open door, I watched the base get smaller and smaller. From up here, the craters looked like pockmarks on a diseased face. The trenches looked like scars. I saw the body bags stacked near the runway, silver sacks glistening in the sun. One of them was Tex. One of them was Professor. I was leaving them behind. A wave of nausea hit me. It wasn't motion sickness. It was guilt. Survivor's guilt. It tasted like copper in the back of my throat. Why me? Why did the bullet hit Professor and not me? Why did the napalm take Tex and not me? There is no answer in war, only luck. And my luck felt like a curse. We landed in Da Nang, then a flight to Okinawa, and then the world. That's what we called America. The world. I expected it to be golden. I expected a parade, or at least a handshake. But 1968. America was not the America I left. I landed in San Francisco. I was still wearing my uniform. I was proud of it. It was stained, worn thin, but it was mine. I walked through the terminal, my duffel bag over my shoulder. I saw a group of young people waiting at the gate. They had long hair. They held signs. I smiled. I thought they were welcoming us. Then I saw the words on the signs. Baby killer. Murderer. Shame. A girl, no older than me, stepped forward. She had flowers in her hair. She looked me right in the eye and spat in my face. I didn't move. I didn't wipe it off. I just stood there, 19 years old, with shrapnel in my leg, and my best friend's blood on my hands, while a girl who had never heard a gunshot screamed at me. I realized then that the war hadn't ended. It had just changed location. I walked past them. I didn't say a word. I just wanted to go home. I took a bus back to Ohio. It was raining when I arrived. A soft, gentle rain. Not the monsoon deluges of Vietnam. I walked down my street. The houses looked the same. The lawns were manicured. The mailboxes were painted. It was so quiet. Too quiet. I found myself walking in the middle of the road, scanning the tree line for snipers, checking for tripwires in the flower beds. My father opened the door. He looked older. He hugged me. My mother cried and tried to feed me pot roast. I ate it, but I couldn't taste anything. It tasted like ash. Then came Sarah. She came over that evening. She was wearing the yellow ribbon in her hair, just like I remembered. She looked beautiful, clean, innocent. She ran to me and threw her arms around my neck. "John, you're home. You're finally home." She laughed. I stood there, stiff as a board. I tried to hug her back. I wanted to. But when I closed my eyes, I didn't see Sarah. I saw the NVA soldier in the trench. I saw the shovel hitting his neck. I saw Tex's arm. I pulled away. "What's wrong?" she asked, her smile fading. "John, talk to me." "I'm tired, Sarah," I said. "I'm just tired." I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell her that the boy she loved died in a hole on Hill 861. The thing standing in front of her was just a shell, a ghost wearing John Miller's face. We broke up 2 months later. She said I was distant. She said I scared her sometimes. She was right. I scared myself. I couldn't sleep. The silence of the bedroom was deafening. So I started sleeping on the floor. It felt safer. I kept a knife under my pillow. When a car backfired on the street, I would dive behind the sofa, shaking, waiting for the mortar round to hit. My parents looked at me with sad, confused eyes. They didn't understand. Nobody understood, except the guys who were there. Years went by. The red clay washed off my skin, but it never washed out of my mind. I got a job. I got married eventually. I had kids. I lived a life. But part of me is always sitting in that bunker, waiting for the sun to rise. I still have Professor's book. It sits on my bookshelf. The bloodstain on the cover has turned black with age. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I open it. I read the lines he used to read to us. "Let me not then die ingloriously, and without a struggle, but let me first do some great thing that shall be told among men hereafter. I am an old man now. My hair is white. My leg still aches when it rains." People ask me if I was a hero. I tell them no. Heroes are the ones who didn't come back. Heroes are the ones who gave their tomorrows so that we could have our todays. Tex, Professor, the kid who died for a canteen of water. They are the heroes. I am just a witness. I am just the keeper of the scars. War doesn't end when the treaty is signed. It doesn't end when the guns go silent. For those of us who came home, the war continues every single day. In the sudden noises, in the smell of diesel, in the nightmares, we carry it so you don't have to. If you are watching this, and you are sitting in a warm room, safe and sound, take a moment. Remember the boys who are still 19 years old in our memories. Remember the price that was paid for your silence. Because history is not just dates and maps. History is blood. History is fear. History is human. My name is John Miller, and I finally made it home. This has been a Homecoming Scars production. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of the history we carry, please subscribe. Join us as we uncover the forgotten stories of the past. Because if we forget them, we are doomed to repeat them. Stay safe and never forget